Welcome back. This is the 67th segment out of 70 of Making Sense for 7 minutes, where during this summer-long series, we've been taking a survey of our historical narrative in somewhat bite-sized pieces and asking, as always, the immeasurably relevant question, so what? Now, this historical narrative is universal. It is history, and this history is his story. The account of what God has done and continues to do to bring about the redemption of his fallen creation, working in and through the lives of those who have responded to the saving grace offered through Jesus Christ. Now, the highest priorities followers of Jesus have is for us to invest ourselves in the lives of others and our communities in order to share with others who don't know Jesus what we've been given in a relationship with him. And this is done in two ways: what we do and what we say. In the very beginning of the book of Acts in the New Testament, the physician Luke is writing a letter, and this is the same Luke who wrote the gospel according to Luke. And we read where Luke says and refers to all that Jesus began to do and teach. Now, I'm convinced that in God's economy, these two words, do and teach, are put in that order for a purpose. You see, it's what we do that authenticates what we say. At the same time, what we do is only understood when we explain it. Now, understanding these two, doing and saying, working together, is the antidote to that really silly thing you'll hear some religious types say every now and then: always preach the gospel and use words when necessary. That's like saying always feed the poor and use food when necessary. And then some of them, to make matters worse, they attribute that statement to St. Francis of Assisi, of all people, who, if I were him, I'd sue for libel, slander, silliness. But we'll get to the saying part, the talking part, next segment. But let me strongly assert right now that when I refer to what we do, I'm not referring to that occasional random good deed. What I'm talking about is that which is to be a lifestyle. Not surprisingly, the Bible gives us a plethora of lifestyle passages. And I think one of the significant ones is found in Paul's letter to the Philippians, the 2nd chapter, verses 3 through 8. It is chock full of insight and instruction and implications. So let me commend it to you, as they say, because here's what we read. Do nothing out of selfishness or empty conceit, but with humility of mind, let each of you regard one another as more important than himself. Do not merely look out for your own personal interest, but also for the interest of others. Have this attitude in yourselves, which was also in Christ Jesus, who, although he existed in the form of God, did not regard equality with God a thing to be grasped, but emptied himself, taking the form of a bond servant. And being made in a likeness of a man, he humbled himself and became obedient, even to death on a cross. Now let me highlight 3 key points in this passage. One is, this is a countercultural calling. Listen, do nothing from selfishness or empty conceit, but with humility of mind, let each of you regard one another as more important than himself. Do not merely look out for your own personal interest, but also for the interest of others. Need I say more? Countercultural. Second highlight. The importance of thinking is paramount. Listen how many times the life of the mind is mentioned, and I'll help. Do nothing out of selfishness or empty conceit, but with humility of mind, let each of you regard one another as more important than himself. Have this attitude in yourselves, which was also in Christ Jesus, who, although he existed in the form of God, did not regard equality with God a thing to be grasped, but emptied himself, taking the form of a bond servant. I missed one of those with my fingers, but there are 5 in like 3 verses. Listen, after we're told to think like Jesus, we're then told what Jesus thought and what he did because of what he thought. What you think determines what you do. Thinking plus doing equals lifestyle. So, thanks, y'all.